He didn't say a word as she threw his shirts onto the wet grass. He didn't flinch when her lover called him a zero in front of the neighbors. He simply stood there, calm, almost peaceful, because he knew something they didn't. In 3 months, the woman destroying his marriage and the man destroying his dignity would walk into a boardroom on the 50th floor of a $9 billion empire and find out exactly who they had humiliated. This is a story of quiet patience and devastating karma. Subscribe, like this video, and comment where you're watching from. You will not believe how this ends. The rain hadn't started yet, but the sky over the quiet suburban street was the color of wet concrete, heavy and waiting. Xavier Cole stood on his own front lawn, hands in the pockets of a faded gray jacket, watching his life get thrown out through the front door of a house he had paid for in cash 6 years ago. A leather duffel bag hit the pavement first, then a box of books. Then his father's old watch, still in its case, bouncing once on the grass before settling near his shoe. "You're not even going to fight for this." Maya's voice cracked through the cool evening air, sharp and theatrical, like she needed the neighbors to hear it. "That's so you, Xavier. Just stand there. Just take it. That's all you've ever done." She stood in the doorway of the house, arms crossed, her designer coat draped over her shoulders like armor. Behind her, leaning against the doorframe with the smug ease of a man who believed the house was already his, stood Marcus Reyes, mid-30s, expensive haircut, a watch on his wrist that cost more than most people's cars. Xavier said nothing. "Nothing to say?" Marcus laughed, stepping past Maya onto the porch. "Man, I almost feel bad for you. Almost." He looked to Xavier up and down. The plain jeans, the old jacket, the unremarkable face of a man who could disappear in any crowd in America. "You really thought a woman like Maya was going to spend her whole life with a nobody? She's got a future now. Real money, real position. You're just furniture she's finally throwing out." A few of the neighbors had drifted onto their porches, pretending to check mail, pretending not to watch. Xavier could feel their eyes, could feel the particular cruelty of being humiliated in public, in the one place a man was supposed to be safe. He still said nothing. Maya walked down the steps now, right up to him, close enough that he could smell the perfume Marcus had probably bought her. Her eyes, once soft when they'd first met 11 years ago, were narrow now, filled with something between contempt and impatience. "I got the job at Apex Horizon," she said, chin lifted. "Director of Client Relations. $9 billion, Xavier. $9 billion. Do you understand what that means? I sit in meetings with people who run this world. I finally have a life that matters. And you," she gestured at him, at the modest clothes, at the quiet, unremarkable stillness of him. "You're still nothing. You've always been nothing. I don't know why I waited this long." "She's right," Marcus added, tossing one more box onto the lawn. This one full of old photographs, their wedding picture sliding out and landing face down in the grass. "Some men are built for more, some men just aren't." "No hard feelings, Xavier. Really." Xavier crouched, slowly, and picked up the photograph. He looked at it for a moment, a younger version of himself, a younger version of Maya, both of them smiling like they meant it. Then he set it gently back on top of the box, stood, and looked at his wife with an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't grief, wasn't even surprise. It was something closer to recognition, like a man watching a prediction come true. "You're really not going to fight?" Maya asked again, and for just a flicker of a second, something like doubt crossed her face, because his calm unsettled her more than rage would have. Rage she could have used against him. This silence gave her nothing to push against. "No," Xavier said finally, his voice quiet even. "I'm not going to fight." "Pathetic," Marcus muttered, shaking his head, already pulling his phone out to text someone. That was when the first headlights swept across the cul-de-sac. Then a second. Then 5 more. 7 black SUVs, matte, gleaming even under the gray sky, moving with the kind of synchronized precision that didn't belong on a quiet residential street, rolled to a stop along the curb. Neighbors who had been pretending not to watch stopped pretending altogether. A driver in a tailored black suit stepped out of the lead vehicle first, walked around with unhurried purpose, and opened the rear door. Not for Maya, not for Marcus, for Xavier. "Mr. Cole," the driver said with a small, respectful nod. We're ready whenever you are, sir. The street went silent. Maya blinked. What is this? Marcus's smug expression faltered for the first time all evening. Are you being repossessed? Is someone taking your stuff? Is that what? No, Xavier said simply. He bent down, picked up the duffel bag from the grass, leaving the rest of the boxes exactly where they'd been thrown, and walked toward the car. This is just my ride. Your ride? Maya's voice had lost its edge now, replaced by something thinner, more uncertain. Xavier, what is going on? Whose cars are these? He paused at the open door, glancing back at her one last time. There was no cruelty in his eyes, no triumph, just a strange, quiet calm. The calm of a man who had already grieved this moment long before it happened, and had made his peace with it in private, alone, months ago. Take care of yourself, Maya, he said. I hope Marcus makes you happy. Then he got in the car. The door closed with a soft, expensive click. The convoy pulled away in perfect formation, taillights disappearing down the street, leaving Maya and Marcus standing on the lawn among scattered photographs and thrown clothes. The neighbors' eyes still on them, the questions hanging heavy and unanswered in the cooling air. 20 minutes later, the convoy turned off the residential streets and onto the private access road that led toward the glass spire rising above the skyline. Apex Horizon Tower, 50 floors of steel and glass, headquarters of the company Maya had bragged about for weeks. The company worth $9 billion. The company Xavier had built from a single office and a single idea, 17 years ago, before Maya had ever known his name. He rode in silence, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows, his expression unreadable. In his lap sat a single folder, thin, unassuming, the kind of folder that could end careers, marriages, and empires, depending on what was inside. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Mr. Cole, do you want me to bring the car around to the private entrance, or the main lobby? Xavier considered this for a long moment. Main lobby, he said quietly. I think it's time I started paying closer attention to who's working in my building. He opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a personnel file, freshly printed, with a photograph clipped to the corner. Marcus Reyes, Regional Manager, Client Accounts Division. Xavier had known about the affair for 4 months. He had known about tonight's eviction for nearly as long. Had, in fact, quietly encouraged it, letting Maya believe she was the one in control, letting her walk deeper and deeper into a decision she could never take back. He hadn't fought back tonight, not because he was weak. He hadn't fought back because the real fight hadn't started yet. He closed the folder, looked out at the city lights, and allowed himself, for the first time all evening, the faintest trace of a smile. Let's see how far you two are willing to go, he murmured to no one at all, as the tower came into view, glowing gold against the darkening sky. 3 weeks passed before Maya saw Xavier again. She had moved into Marcus's downtown condo, sleek, modern, everything the old house with Xavier had never been, and thrown herself into her new role at Apex Horizon with the hunger of someone determined to prove she'd made the right choice. She was good at the job, genuinely good, and within days she and Marcus had become something of a fixture in the building. The sharp, stylish power couple everyone in client accounts either admired or resented. It was a Tuesday morning, the lobby crowded with the usual river of suits and badges, when Maya spotted a familiar figure standing near the security desk. Xavier, in the same faded grey jacket, the same plain jeans, standing quietly off to the side, like a man waiting for a bus, not a man standing in the marble lobby of a $9 billion company. Is that? Maya froze mid-step. Marcus followed her gaze and let out a short, disbelieving laugh. No way. No way. What's your ex doing here? They crossed the lobby together, and Maya felt an old, ugly satisfaction rise in her chest. The same instinct that had let her throw his belongings onto the lawn 3 weeks earlier. Here, in front of her new colleagues, in the building that represented everything she had become, she wanted him to feel small one more time. Xavier, she said loudly, enough for a few passing employees to glance over. What are you doing here? This is a private corporate building, not a place for… She gestured at his clothes. Whatever this is. Xavier looked at her calmly. I had some business here. Business? Marcus stepped in close, lowering his voice into something mocking. Buddy, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but you can't just wander into a building like this. Security. He raised a hand, and two guards near the front desk turned. Xavier didn't move. He didn't protest. He simply looked toward the guards and gave the smallest shake of his head. The guards, who answered to instructions far above Marcus's understanding, stayed exactly where they were. Marcus frowned, confused by their hesitation, then turned back to Xavier with a sneer, mistaking the standoff for his own victory. Yeah, that's what I thought. You don't belong here. You never belonged anywhere important. Do everyone a favor and leave before we have you escorted out like the vagrant you are. A small crowd of employees had gathered near the elevators, watching. Maya said nothing to stop him. In fact, she smiled, arms crossed, enjoying every second of it. Xavier held her gaze for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet, patient sadness, the look of a man confirming something he already knew. All right, he said softly. I'll go. He turned and walked out through the revolving doors, disappearing into the morning crowd on the street, while behind him Marcus laughed and told the gathered employees a story about some homeless guy who wandered in, embellishing it more with every retelling. Maya laughed along. She had no idea that 3 floors above her, in a private elevator only a handful of executives even knew existed, the man she'd just called a vagrant had a standing appointment with the chief legal officer of Apex Horizon Group. Over the following 2 months, something in Marcus began to shift, subtly at first, then with increasing recklessness. Flush with his new relationship, his rising influence in the client accounts division, and an ego inflated by every small cruelty he'd gotten away with, he began routing vendor contracts through shell companies he quietly controlled. Inflated invoices, phantom consulting fees, kickbacks disguised as strategic partnerships. Maya, eager to prove her value and blinded by the same hunger for more, helped him funnel client accounts toward those same shell vendors, skimming a percentage each time, certain that a company this size would never notice a few $1 million slipping through the cracks of its own accounting. They had no idea that every transaction was being logged, watched, quietly assembled into a case file that grew thicker by the week, sitting on the desk of a legal team that answered to only one person in the entire company. Xavier had built Apex Horizon from nothing 17 years ago, and had spent almost as long making sure the world never learned his face. He didn't need attention. He didn't need credit. He needed only to see, clearly, who the people around him really were when they thought no one important was watching. Now he knew. Exactly 3 months to the day after the eviction, the doors of the client accounts floor burst open, not with security guards, but with federal marshals, moving in formation alongside a team of corporate attorneys in dark suits. Laptops were seized. Desks were sealed with evidence tape. Employees stood frozen at their cubicles as Marcus and Maya were escorted, white-faced and stammering, out of the bullpen and into a private conference room. "This is a mistake," Marcus kept saying, over and over, sweat beading at his temple. "There's been some kind of mistake." It wasn't a mistake. The federal complaint, when it was finally read aloud to them by a stone-faced attorney, detailed charges of wire fraud, corporate espionage, and embezzlement, totaling requested damages of $500 million. Marcus's hands shook so badly he could barely hold the paper they handed him. Maya read the numbers 3 times before the meaning fully landed, her breath catching in her throat. "There must be some kind of misunderstanding," she whispered. "We need to talk to whoever's in charge. Please, whoever owns this company, we need 5 minutes." The attorney simply nodded. "That can be arranged." They were escorted, in silence, to a private elevator neither of them had ever noticed before, and taken up, a floor after floor, climbing past the numbers they knew, past the executive suites they'd only ever seen from a distance, all the way to the top, the 50th floor. The doors opened onto a boardroom of glass and quiet wealth, the entire city spread out beneath the windows, like something owed to whoever sat in the chair facing away from them. The chair spun around. Maya's knees buckled. Xavier sat there, not in a faded grey jacket, not in plain jeans, but in a tailored charcoal suit that fit him with the quiet precision of true old money. His expression was calm, unbothered, the same calm he'd worn on the lawn 3 months ago, The same calm from the lobby 3 weeks ago. Except now, finally, they understood what that calm had actually meant. You, Marcus breathed, all the color draining from his face. His legs gave out beneath him, and he sank into the nearest chair, staring at Xavier like a man staring at his own execution. No, Maya whispered, shaking her head, tears already spilling down her cheeks. No, this isn't. Xavier, please, you have to understand. I was manipulated. He pushed me into this. I never wanted any of this. Please. You called me a zero, Xavier said quietly, cutting through her words without raising his voice. On my own lawn, in front of my neighbors. You called me a vagrant, in my own lobby, in front of my own employees. I didn't know, Maya sobbed. I didn't know it was yours. I would never have. That's exactly the problem, Xavier said. You didn't need to know whose it was to be cruel. You were cruel because you thought I was nothing. That's who you are, Maya, not who I am. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked at both of them one final time. Not with hatred, not with satisfaction, but with the quiet finality of a man closing a book he had already finished reading long ago. The lawyers will take it from here, he said. You wanted a man who mattered. Now you'll spend the next several years finding out exactly how much I do. He walked past them both, toward the elevator, and didn't look back.